Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is our enriching network visibility across our QRadar NDR solution as well as our ReaQta EDR solution demonstration. And essentially today, what I'm going to be showcasing is how these two solutions help us achieve our XDR strategy here at IBM. And how we do that is by combining what these two solutions do best and ensuring that we can achieve all of the visibility that we need to make a comprehensive cybersecurity assessment, as well as ensure that we are protected against zero-day threats as we know it. So, what I hope to achieve throughout the demonstration is, of course, to highlight on QRadar's offense and rule correlation for insights ability as we obtain offenses as from ReaQta as alerts. We then hope to look into the threat hunting proactively with our QRadar Analyst Workflow Visual Builder to showcase how we can achieve both event and flow telemetry when we're pivoting off of one specific IP address, which we'll see later on is going to be our endpoint IP. I'm then going to showcase the payload visibility that we get with QRadar. While in some cases we're going to see those properties parsed out, we're also going to see the whole payload, which again provides full visibility into what's happening here within our network, and then taking that and leveraging response into ReaQta, looking at the ReaQta alert behavioral tree, and then showcasing the power of the remediation plan. We begin the demonstration in a Windows 10 victim machine, and we introduce the possibility of an employee who's either maybe in HR or recruiting, who's in constant exchange of external files, and they receive a resume which they go to open on their desktop. And oftentimes, as security professionals, we understand that a lot of these attachments may come weaponized. So in opening up the CV, we open it up without knowing that it is in fact an infected document with a non-signature based strain of malware. And the document, obviously, at the user level standpoint, opens without any noticeable signs of compromise. And this leads us just to continue on our normal day-to-day, but in the ReaQta Hive, which we will look at later, an alert has generated saying that a behavioral anomaly has been detected. So as an analyst, we're going to, switch the perspective to a day in the life of an analyst. And as analysts deal with SIEMs, security information event management solutions in their day-to-day life, just to look at the offenses coming in through their environment and be able to classify them as malicious or, false positive. So the QRadar offenses tab offers up, offenses that come through by their magnitude, and analysts are able to draw their attention based off of, is this a high magnitude alert? Does it require my attention over this low magnitude alert, right, etc. So we have two offenses that are seen, from the analyst standpoint. We have this all ReaQta EDR alerts become offenses. And this offense essentially is saying that we want any alert that comes from the ReaQta Hive as a log, event. We want it to generate alert, so it draws our analyst attention to, okay, we have some activity happening in the ReaQta Hive. Further, we have this behavioral anomaly detected on the endpoint. And essentially what that is the alert that's in ReaQta saying that when we opened up that Word document, the HR professional opened up that Word document, a behavioral anomaly was detected. And ReaQta is letting QRadar know, hey, we saw this from our endpoint telemetry end. Can you further investigate from your end? And so with that, we can see, okay, we have this generic, behavioral anomaly detected on this endpoint from this source IP, this 10.0.0.126. So we know that that is the endpoint IP. We can see that we have one event that's associated with this, 0 flows, and we have one insight. And, to the analyst eye, okay, I need to do some further investigation. So what I like to do is pivot to the QWorkbench app, which is an internal tool that allows us to essentially simulate network traffic, right? So what we would normally see on a day-to-day basis in our QRadar. And what we're going to do is we're going to enrich the endpoint telemetry with our SIM for this endpoint IP that we previously mentioned. And what I'm going to do is when I run this, I'm going to be simulating events and flows that are going to correlate to this endpoint. So I'm basically simulating activity that's happening at this endpoint. And what I hope to achieve is specific events and flows that are going to showcase an end-to-end attack chain of what's going on that expands from just the endpoint telemetry. So heading back into offenses, we're going to start to see how QRadar correlates different kinds of events and flows to chaining all of these events together to creating one offense. So we see that here, where we previously saw just this behavioral anomaly detected on endpoint offense. I now see all the chaining of what I just ran in QWorkbench. And why this is valuable is because we're taking all of these events and flows that are malicious or they're showcasing an end-to-end attack chain. And instead of having, let's say, 5-6 different offenses, we have one single offense that's going to tell us the entire story. It's going to take all of these events, flows, and activities that are going on this one endpoint. QRadar is able to essentially use its behavioral sense to look into the data and the analytics to say all of these events and flows are happening on one endpoint, so therefore I'm just going to create one offense for my analyst. So let's drill into the offense, and essentially what we see is great volume of insight. So now the value of QRadar becomes, okay, QRadar is able to really hone in on all of these different activities happening on the network, right? Not just at the endpoint layer. So the whole, messaging here is, well, these solutions really are better together. So we can see now we have potential data exfiltration using large DNS traffic. This infected workstation is downloading data from a critical server, which we don't want to be seeing. And we have some local database scanning going on, and it's all coming in correspondence, right? It's correlating to this behavioral anomaly that was detected on the endpoint. So while ReaQta can tell us, yes, we detected this behavioral anomaly on the endpoint, we're now leveraging QRadar's strong suit of being able to look at what's the full picture in the network. So let's take all of the events that are happening with this endpoint and let's look at it and let's correlate it and let's bring it together so we can have our analysts look into this with one screen, essentially. So prior we saw one event here and 0 flows. So now we have 7 events and 111 flows, which is incredible. Again, we have our source IP here, and it's communicating with several destination IPs, as we can see. So we now have 5 insights, which are really critical, and we're seeing, okay, so this is the QRadar logic and the rules coming together. We're starting to get a more end-to-end picture of what's going on here. What I always like to mention is the fusion with the MITRE ATT&CK tactics and techniques. Why this is important is because it's looking at what adversarial behaviors are we seeing in the environment that can relate to this offense. And as I prior mentioned, with the QWorkbench, when we're running the runs with the events and flows, we're essentially trying to simulate, right, what an end-to-end attack chain will look like in this case. So this is important because QRadar is able to map these kinds of events and flows to say, yes, we see initial access, we see execution, we see discovery going on. And really what this is saying is this has gone all the way from initial access, right, when the endpoint was compromised, and it's gone to data exfiltration within the network. And this is important because we're starting to see why we need to really focus in on embedding our solutions, integrating our solutions, and really powering in on what makes these solutions unique. So now if we wanted to dive deeper into the events and flow telemetry as I've been talking about, we can go in and view the events from the offense. So these are going to be all the events that contribute to the overarching offense. And we can really understand from a detailed artifact-based standpoint, what's going on here. So if we drill into our visual builder, we get into proactive threat hunting. And proactive threat hunting essentially within QRadar Visual Builder is really easy to do. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, I want to know any time that anything is communicating to or from this compromised IP as we know it. So we can construct a query that's going to allow us to look at, well, what are we in communication with here? And how can I really dissect what parts of my network are, compromised, what's been tampered with, what's, been exfiltrated. We need to know these kinds of things as an analyst, so we have a comprehensive report and investigation, and we know how to most effectively respond. This is another critical feature of the Visual Builder, the time frame selection, where we're able to, as an analyst, look at specific time frames to see what events or flows we want to see within maybe the last 5 minutes, maybe the last 48 hours, or if we have a custom, very specific time frame that we want to look at, we can do that as well. So again, it just really makes this query so much more effective for an analyst and customizable as possible, but also very easy. It's AQL-less, so those of us who aren't AQL savvy are still in the game, right? And we can also leverage this against our events and flows, which again is something that we've been talking about is extremely important in this case and what makes QRadar so special. So we're first going to search against our flows, or events, sorry about that. And what we see here is all of the events at play as it correlates to this source IP, this 10.0.0.126 that we've been talking about. So we can see, because this is a timeline that started from the very beginning to the very end of every event that has happened that QRadar has picked up on. And what we see is first from our ReaQta Hive, the behavioral anomaly, so the alert that came from ReaQta. And then we see all ReaQta EDR alerts become offenses because we want our analysts' attention to be drawn to any alerts that are coming into the Hive, because we're talking about comprehensive security, not segregated security. So we want our solutions to be able to communicate with one another. We see some, our firewall, a session was allowed. We see our IPS solution at play here. We see, this user access the DGA domain, which of course we want to know about. We see some local database scanning. The infected workstation, remember, it downloads some data from a critical server, as well as this SFTP session was closed, and then the potential data exfiltration. So we see all the way from the initial compromise of the endpoint, and then QRadar is going to tell us, oh, ReaQta is saying this, well, this is what we caught. And it's basically saying, okay, we can take what ReaQta is giving us and we can enrich it to give us more comprehensive security and give our analysts the insights that they need to tune our environment to ensure that there's no holes, there's no weaknesses, and we have, security postures evolving throughout our organization. Another key telemetry point that QRadar provides, just from this standpoint, is that this user, Frank Adams, is affiliated with a lot of these events. So just from this standpoint, we have gained event telemetry and user telemetry. Now, let's look at the flow telemetry. So again, we're looking at the flows to and from, this IP. So we can look at the packets in this, again, chronological order. And what we're seeing is the communication is taking place on this destination port 53. Destination port 53 is a common data exfiltration port, specifically DNS tunneling, right? And how can we confirm, from the standpoint of flows, why is data exfiltration besides the fact that it's on destination port 53? Well, we see huge volume in the source and destination bytes, which is indicating, normally you're not seeing this much bytes being transferred across your network. You just don't normally see that. So we can automatically confirm large packet transfers are going out of our network, and of course, we don't want to be seeing that. So now the question becomes, now that we've looked at our flow telemetry, our event telemetry, our user telemetry, we really want to look at, okay, we really have this malicious nature going on, we know it, let's look at ReaQta to see what ReaQta can provide. But before we do so, I just want to stop for a minute and talk about why event and flow telemetry are really important to the story here. Well, in my opinion, and any security professional's opinion, they're going to tell you, flows are critical pieces of information because they are immutable, they cannot be tampered with, and they do not lie. And they provide context into your network that is unmatchable. So really, when you're missing out on flow telemetry, you're missing out on really contextual information that is really, really important as it pertains to investigations. With events, they're important because they're telling us, what's happening in the network. And then we're going to look at, by drilling back into our events, why it's important to have the events come in. Well, with the events, we have, custom properties that QRadar is able to parse. So for an analyst at quick standpoint, they're able to say, okay, I have all of the artifacts that I need, neatly panned out. We can see we have the file name, the alert, and the MD5 hash, which QRadar is able to take from the complex payload and make very easy to the analyst's eye to see. But why is it important to check the payload? Well, the payload provides visibility that showcases the entire, what's going on. So we're able to see, the path, the user that's associated, what privilege level is this, and any hashes that are associated as well. So we get the contextual standpoint as well as the parsed out properties so that we ensure we aren't missing anything. And from here, we can drill right into the ReaQta Hive, and we're taken directly to the alert that came in that we saw in the very beginning of the demo, the behavioral anomaly that was generated based off of the malicious weaponized document that we opened up as an HR professional. So now we have really drilling into the endpoint telemetry, which is critically important. So what we are talking about is, again, what makes these solutions so special that's so important to us? Well, for ReaQta, we get all of these key events that our Nano OS is able to essentially generate to us to say, okay, this is the kind of activity, the behavior that we're seeing from that level, as well as an alert breakdown summary of, okay, we have this behavioral anomaly detected from when we launched the Microsoft Word application, but when that was done, this child process try.me.exe was created. Again, we have some artifacts on the affected endpoint. Again, user F Adams. So now what really makes ReaQta special is the behavioral tree. And what the behavioral tree essentially does for us is it gives us a comprehensive way to view the attack chain from a very easy standpoint. We have all of the relevant information right in front of our eyes of all of the different processes, behaviors that have been correlated to this offense, and how to react to deem this malicious based on the behavior. So while, QRadar can really look at the facts and the data and automate it, ReaQta really hones in on behavior because, as we're seeing with zero-day threats, a lot of malicious IOCs are not published, and therefore the behavioral is what makes ReaQta so special, because anytime there's malicious behavior that an AV solution can't detect, ReaQta kicks in and detects it automatically. So what we see here is that we did have this unsigned application, or unsigned process, this try.me.exe. We see this cross-process operation, which could indicate code injection. We see an executable was dropped, and we see key logging activity here. So right here, we can understand, yes, this is malicious. This definitely should not be happening. And what we can ask ourselves as an analyst is, well, what is the most effective way to respond so that I can go back to my CIO, my CISO, and say, I can assure you that this threat is never going to happen again. How do you achieve that within one click? Right here, since we know this try.me.exe is malicious and we don't want it to affect other endpoints, we can create a blacklist policy. We can name it block this try.me executable, block me, just quick description, and we can say, okay, well, do we want to target this against specific clients, specific tenants of endpoints, or do we want to hone in on one endpoint? No, really to ensure that this doesn't affect the entire organization's infrastructure again, we're going to do a global. So this means that any endpoint that is connected to the ReaQta Hive is going to be protected from this malicious executable. It's going to be blocked and killed automatically before any damage is done. So we're going to go ahead and create this blacklist policy. We can see the policy was automatically created, and essentially we can now rest assured that this won't enter our environment again, so long as the policy is enabled. Now we get into response. And as an analyst, you want this process to be as easy and as streamlined as possible. So therefore, the remediation plan offers that up, as we're able to quickly notice the try.me.exe. We know we want to kill and remove that process. ReaQta will let us know if there's any dropped executables that have been associated with that process. We're able to go ahead and remove them. If there was any file system persistencies that we would want to rid of, if there's any registry persistencies that we wanted to remove, as well as, the whole objective in EDR solution is to be able to isolate endpoints at a snap of your fingertips, given that it is infected, or you want to, for some reason, isolate an endpoint for other reasons, but still gain control to the endpoint from the back end, from the Hive. So you can go ahead and do that here. You can isolate the endpoint, and then you get a remediation summary of everything that you did in the remediation plan. We can see that we've killed and removed these processes. The following dropped executable will be removed. We can go ahead and confirm that, and it tells us automatically the remediation request has been created, and within seconds after that, you'll be assured that all of those actions or tasks that you indicated did take place. So that concludes the demonstration. I just want to quickly recap the value here. And the value really is that by combining both ReaQta and QRadar's capabilities, we can hone in on and leverage what makes these solutions such strong security solutions. And we can take those AI, automation, machine learning technologies to gain full visibility from what's going on in the network, what's going on at the endpoint layer, and efficiently respond. In order to efficiently respond, you have to have context. And with just one or the other solution, or without making them fused and blended, we're missing out on the full picture of how, as analysts and as organizations, we can close in on those vulnerabilities and on those gaps to ensure that we're protected and we have full confidence that we understand how each of these pieces fits into the overlying XDR solution. By integrating solutions, we foster an XDR strategy, and without an XDR strategy, we aren't equipped to deal with the threats of tomorrow. Thank you.